Wind came lean across the flats and carried the taste of tin and thirst. Ada Lane walked that wind with a dented pot tied to her pack. She kept her eyes on a low ridge where a cottonwood marked water and maybe work. The Arizona sun pressed down like a hand. The road was only 2 wagon ruts, but she had no wagon, only a pot and 2 hands, and that was enough to keep her going. At the ridge, she saw a ranch spread in the valley. The big house stood plain and square, boards silvered by weather. A man on a bay horse watched the line of the well. Ada stepped to the gate and waited. Her voice was thin when she spoke. "Sir, I can cook for wages or for food. I can fix sourdough and keep men fed on scraps. I'll start today if you'll lend me a stove." The rider dismounted without hurry. He took the pump handle, primed it, and brought up a clean spill. He offered a tin cup. She drank. The water felt like a promise kept. "I'm Eli Hart," he said. "This is Hart Ranch, been short a cook since winter. You any good with beans that won't quit?" "I can make beans listen," Ada answered. It was almost a smile. He looked once and said, "You're home." Then he pointed with 2 fingers, the bunkhouse, the smokehouse, the corral, and the kitchen door that stuck on the bottom board. No fuss, no speech, just the lay of the land and a place to stand. Inside the kitchen, Ada set her pot on the scarred table. She found a sack of pintos, 2 onions going soft, a strip of salt pork and coffee that had gone bitter in the tin. She set water to boil and scraped a clean spot on the stove. Knives were dull. Hinges groaned. The room smelled of ash and old winter. She opened the windows and let the wind chase it out. By noon, a stew talked low in the kettle. Men came in single file, caps in hand, not expecting much. Dust clung to boots. Ada ladled, said grace in 10 plain words, and waited. Silence broke into slow spoons and soft thank yous. Eli fixed the door while she worked, setting the plane to the swollen board. He did not look at her often, but his steady hand spoke clearly. "Stay." Eli showed Ada the bunk room off the kitchen, a narrow space with a small window and a peg for a coat. The mattress was straw and thin, but clean. On the wall, someone had penciled a prayer. Ada touched the words with 2 fingers and nodded. "A place is what you make of it." He set a tin on the table with coins inside. "Week's trial," he said. "If it suits, we'll speak on wages proper." She heard the fairness in it and the risk, too. She had walked far on promises. This one felt steadier. The hands filed back out to fence work. Ada stacked plates, boiled the coffee pot clean with an eggshell, and sharpened the best knife on the unglazed rim of a crock. She mended a towel with quick stitches and set a sourdough starter near the warmest brick. Heat and patience build bread. That was a rule she trusted. Eli brought in a box of tools and laid them by the door. "Hinges, latches, and that split shelf," he said. He did not hover. He went to the porch and began fixing a busted stirrup. The quiet between them felt useful, like twine that holds. By afternoon, Ada had beans soaking, pork trimmed, and onions crisping in a little lard for tomorrow's fry bread. She swept the corners and found a copper button. She kept it for luck. A neighbor woman rode in with a basket and a smile that hid worry. "Mrs. Finch," she said. "Brought eggs and a rumor. Town says a land agent sniffing at wells." Ada thanked her for both and traded a jar of stew. Mrs. Finch sized her up and seemed to approve. "We look after our own when they mind the work," she said. Then she looked past Ada to the neat rows of plates and added, "You mind the work." Toward evening, Eli came to the doorway, hat in hand as if the kitchen were a church. "Storm sign over the flats," he said. "Might blow dust tonight. Keep the windows latched." Ada tied back her sleeves. "I'll keep supper hot and the lamp low." He almost smiled. "Good." She watched him step into the falling light and felt a small ache ease. Work done right is a kind of prayer, and prayers change the weather, if only inside a person. She banked coals and listened for quiet. Dawn came pale and gritty. Ada woke to the small sounds a kitchen makes when it is glad to be used. The tick of cooling iron, the whisper of ash. She stretched her hands, checked the sourdough, and smiled when the starter bubbled like quiet laughter. Outside, the yard wore a coat of dust as if the night had shaken flour across the world. She fried onions and folded them into corn cakes, set coffee to rise and fall 3 times, and warmed yesterday's stew till it talked. The men filed in with dry eyes and nodded thanks. Nobody wasted words. They ate like men who trusted the next hour to be harder than the last. Eli stepped in late, hat brushed clean out of respect for a room that fed him. He tasted the stew, then the corn cake. He did not praise. He took another bite. That was better than talk. Wind's shifting, he said. We'll set posts by the east fence while the ground still knows moisture. I can send bread out by noon, Ada said. And water jugs. He tipped his hat and left. She liked the way his leave-taking made no noise. By mid-morning, Ada carried a pot to the corral where a sorrel gelding tossed his head. A young hand named Pike held the lead rope too tightly. The horse danced sideways, eyes showing white. Loosen and let him breathe, Ada said. Pike blinked. Ma'am? Horses and bread both go wrong if you choke them. She stepped slowly, kept her shoulders easy, and set the pot on a rail. The horse smelled the steam, calmed, and bumped the ladle with a soft mouth. Pike laughed, the sound surprised out of him. Back in the kitchen, Ada rolled out the dough on the mended table. The plain marks Eli had left were smooth under her palms. She cut clean rounds, brushed them with coffee to make a brown crust, and slid them into the oven. Small work, gain. That was a rule. Near noon, wagon wheels sounded on the road. A black umbrella shaded a man the sun seemed to avoid. He wore town clothes and a smile. Good day to the Hart ranch, he called. Caleb Voss, representing claims and comforts. I bring papers and possibilities. He looked past the well, past the house, and fixed on the kitchen door as if it owed him something. Caleb Voss swung down from his buggy as if the ground should be grateful. Dust did not touch his boots. He tipped his hat toward the porch where Eli had come to stand. Mr. Hart, Voss said. Fine, well, fine grass when rain allows. I hold notes on 3 ranches south of you. They plan to sell while there is still sense left. You might follow their wisdom. Eli's face did not change. You'll speak your piece. Then you'll eat if you like. That's the order here. Voss laughed softly. I never refuse hospitality. His eyes slid past Eli to the open window where steam lifted. They paused on Ada as if he had found a coin he once lost. And who is the lady? I believe we have met, if only in the way owners and help meet. Ada set down her spoon. We have not met. Her voice was steady, but the past stood up in her bones. She remembered a town kitchen, a man in a fine coat who counted plates and said the debt grew by the day. Voss spread his hands. Names move like cattle. They drift. But I keep books. I could show a mark-owed by an Ada who left before the term. Papers are clear. Eli stepped to the doorframe and set his palm there, easy. This kitchen is hard ground. If you have papers for me, leave them. If you have words for her, save them. Pike and 2 hands drifted closer, not hostile, just present. Mrs. Finch's mare stood by the rail. The woman herself watched from the saddle, eyes narrow as stitching. Voss smiled without heat. No offense meant. I will return tomorrow to discuss water shares and friendly buyouts. Storms blow quickly on these flats. One must be ready. He turned to go, then added, the law cares little for feelings. It cares for signatures. He tapped his breast pocket. When he drove off, the yard exhaled. Ada leaned on the table. Eli poured 2 cups and set one by her hand. You all right? I will be, she said. Good, he answered. Supper at 6. After we plan fence work. We don't spook. The wind picked up and rattled the latch like a warning bell. Ada checked the sourdough, fed it flour and water, and breathed slowly. Work first, fear later. Rules keep a soul upright inside. Afternoon light poured flat across the yard. Ada set the dough to rest and walked the line of shelves, making a tally in her head. Flour low, coffee low. Beans are enough for a week. Salt pork thin. She wrote a list on brown paper with a stub of pencil and tucked it beside the door latch. Needs named become needs met. That was another rule she trusted. Eli came in carrying a coil of wire. Hands will stretch the fence at first light, he said. Can you pack food for a long day out? I can pack for hard miles, Ada said. She measured cornmeal, lard, and beans. She sliced the last onions thin and set them to dry. She boiled coffee down to a syrup and poured it into a jar for quick cups on the line. Pike bumped the doorway, hat in both hands. Ma'am, could you maybe show me how to keep biscuits from turning to rocks? Ada hid a smile. Bring your worst pan. He did, and they worked shoulder to shoulder. She showed him how to cut fat into flour with 2 knives. Cold fat, hot oven, she said. And don't bully the dough. Pike nodded like he had been given a map. Toward evening, Mrs. Finch returned with a sack of potatoes and news. Town's talk is that Voss has a new deputy friend, she said. Wears a badge soft as butter. Eli set his jaw. Paper and tin make noise. We'll make work. He hung a lantern on the porch and checked cinches for the morning. He did not ask Ada about her past. He did not turn away from it either. The steadiness was a blanket in the draft. Ada cooked a skillet supper. Potatoes crisp, pork small but honest, beans with a brown crust. The men ate at the long table Eli had mended, and their talk was easy, truly. Someone started a low song about a river. Ada did not join, but the sound put a shine on the room. After the dishes, she kneaded tomorrow's bread and laid a clean cloth over the bowl. Eli brought in a small nail and drove it into the wall beside the stove. "For your pot," he said. He lifted it from the table and hung it carefully. "Things have a place." Ada touched the handle. "Thank you." She felt claimed, not owned. There is a difference. It holds. Before sunup, Ada lit the stove and set coffee to whisper. She packed plates, bread rounds, and a pot of beans that slept in embers till they learned patience. She tied down the lids with twine and checked the sky. A long pale stripe lay on the horizon like a blade. Wind would come again. Eli crossed the yard with posts on his shoulder and a maul in hand. He paused at the doorway, touched the nail where her pot hung, and nodded once. They were small things, nails and nods, but they hold a house together. By first light, the crew rode out. Ada followed with the wagon. Pike drove, sitting carefully like a boy wearing a man's hat. At the east fence, the ground gave a little under the hammer, and Eli set rhythm. Measure, brace, drive, tamp. He worked quietly, and men matched him without needing words. Ada set up a rough table on 2 sawhorses and laid out bread and salt. She ladled beans that carried smoke, poured coffee into cups warm from the sun, and reminded Pike not to bully biscuits. He grinned and presented a crooked thing whittled from juniper. "For your kitchen, ma'am," he said. It was a spoon, handle rough but true. Ada turned it in her hand like a gift from the land itself. A coyote stood a long way off and watched them build a straight line across wild country. It blinked, then trotted on. Work draws eyes, even animal ones. Near noon, a rider from the south slowed at the fence and raised 2 fingers in greeting. "Dry Creek sold," he called. Voss paid light but fast. His horse blew dust. "He aims to circle north," we heard, Eli said. He set another post as if the message were only weather. "Speed's not the same as right." The rider nodded and moved on. Clouds stacked soft as wool but held no rain. Ada refilled cups and handed Eli the last heel of bread. Their fingers brushed. It was nothing and something. "Eat," she said. He did, then wiped his hands and adjusted the line with a sighting eye. "Straight now," he said to Pike. "Straight is fair to neighbors." "Straight is a promise," Ada added. "Good line," Eli said. He meant both. They worked till shadows lengthened and the fence hummed low in the wind like a wire hymn. Twilight found the fence true and humming. Ada packed the wagon slowly so nothing rattled in the dark. Pike walked beside her with the juniper spoon tucked in his belt like a badge. The crew spoke little on the ride back. Tired men save words for tomorrow. Coyotes called from the draws, thin silver notes that made the land feel large. At the yard, Ada carried the pot inside and set the dough to rise again. She brushed the tops with coffee, cut 3 shallow slashes, and slid the loaves into the heat. Eli stepped in long enough to wash at the basin. He cleaned his nails with a small blade, then wiped the knife and hung it on a peg, everything in its place. He did not say he was grateful. He glanced at the bread and stayed close to the door like a man who knew better than to get between a cook and her oven. Mrs. Finch came by with a paper-wrapped bundle. "Dried apples," she said. "For a pie when Rain says yes." She set a finger on the spoon in Ada's belt. "Keep that. Tools remember hands." Ada sliced a pan of onions thin as thread and set them to brown slowly. She added fat no more than needed, shook in black pepper, and tipped the beans to a sizzle. When the bread cracked and sang, she lifted 2 loaves to cool. Men drifted in, caps off, and filled plates. A joke passed about Pike courting the cook with a spoon. Ada let it wash over her and only said, "If anyone courts my kitchen, he'd better scrub pots." Laughter loosened backs. Eli's mouth tugged at one corner. He ate standing by the mended door, watching the room as if counting blessings instead of men. After supper, Ada brought out a tin of needles and strong thread. She patched a cuff for Pike, a knee for Sawyer, and set a new button on Eli's work shirt without asking. He stood still, steady as a fence post. When she tied the thread off, he said, "Much obliged." 2 words, full as a full plate. Night blew dust along the porch. Ada banked coals and kept one lamp low. She laid the juniper spoon on the shelf. Small gifts saved, small vows kept, stars tried to show. The house felt less like a stop and more like a start. Before sunrise, Ada carried a bucket to the well and found a wooden dipper hung there, new cut, the handle sanded smooth. Eli must have carved it at some late hour. She turned it in her hand and smiled. Tools remember hands. Gifts remember hours. She set coffee to roll and fall, then taught Pike the rule. Boil it once, let it settle, bring it just shy of angry, she said. If it boils twice, it bites. Pike watched the surface and nodded as if she had shown him where a hidden creek ran. Mrs. Finch arrived with a scrap of hymn in her pocket. For when the men eat fast, she said, laying the words on the shelf. A tune tames a room. Ada read the lines and tucked them near the stove. Some things go better with a song close by. Eli came in with a bent hinge he had straightened and oiled. He fixed the back door so it would close without complaint. Wind's hard on weak places, he said. Work is hard on weak places too, Ada answered. He gave that half smile and set the oiled hinge to test. It moved quietly like a cat. By mid-morning, riders from 2 neighbor outfits clattered in, hats up in greeting. Tomorrow they'd brand at the north pens. Today they were counting heads and fixing ropes. Ada marked her list again. More bread, more beans, a kettle of coffee big as a washtub. She checked flour, checked firewood, checked herself, calm as a tool. Pike tried his biscuits alone and brought one to the table like a trophy. It was light enough to forgive. Ada tapped its crust. You eased up, she said. I stopped bullying, he said. The room chuckled, not at him but with him. One of the neighbors, a woman with a scar on her jaw, traded Ada a small tin of sage. For meat, she said. Also for cuts if you make a wash. Ada thanked her and tucked the tin into the shelf beside the juniper spoon. The kitchen was becoming a map of favors given and taken. Toward evening, a stray yearling bawled from the wash. Eli and Sawyer jogged down. Ada stood at the fence and watched how Eli moved. No hurry, no show. He looped once and dropped a clean catch, heel to dirt, like writing his name. The yearling stopped fighting, air returned to peace, and the line held. Quiet hands, Ada said mostly to herself. That's real strength. Branding day rose bright and sharp. Smoke lifted in blue threads from the north pens. Calves bawled, ropes sang, and irons glowed like fallen coals. Ada set her table under a tarp and turned the big kettle so steam ran away from the wind. She kept coffee moving and beans steady. Bread came out in waves. Hands were standing, then went back to the work like a tide. A boy from the Miller place took a horn to the thigh. He limped, blood slicking his jeans. Panic made him loud. Ada caught his elbow and spoke plainly. Sit, breathe, look at me. He did. She heated water, crushed sage with the butt of a spoon and washed the cut till the red ran clean. She boiled a needle and held it with a rag. The boy shook. This will bite, she said. Then it will mend. She stitched neatly, 4 pulls, 5, 6. She tied off and wrapped the leg with a strip torn from a flour sack. You are good, she said. Go slow today. Fast is not brave. Finished is brave. Mrs. Finch stood nearby, arms folded. Clean work, she said. Quiet hands, Ada nodded. Quiet saves more than shouting. Across the pen, a calf flipped and jammed a foreleg under its weight. Eli moved like a thought. He dropped a loop clean, rolled the calf, freed the leg, and eased it to the ground. He tapped the brander once. The iron kissed and lifted. No waste, respect in every motion. Men saw and took note. At noon the sun hammered. Ada dipped cups and poured over wrists before handing them off. Little mercies beat heat. Pike carried pans and took teasing with grace. His biscuits held Voss did not show. His absence felt like a shadow without a man in it. The work was held on the day anyway. By late light, the last iron hissed in sand and the smoke thinned. Ada passed slices of apple she had dried and sugared. She looked at Eli across the pens. He looked back, tipped 2 fingers, then checked a gate chain. Not much was said. Enough was known. Keep your line. Keep your word, Ada murmured. That's the brand that lasts. Night would come easily after work like this and the house would breathe. Sunday brought the town together like a slow river. The little white church sat above the creek. Bell rope frayed, door paint tired. Families came in wagons, riders tied off at the rail, and voices carried in the dust like low birds. Ada set a basket on the back table, bread, dried apples, and a small pot of beans to share after the hymn. Eli walked beside her, hat in hand. He nodded to neighbors, shook a hand here and there, and took the back bench like a man who prefers walls behind him. Mrs. Finch slid in at Ada's other side and passed a small hymn card. "Sing if you want," she said. "Hum if you need." The preacher spoke plainly about drought, duty, and fairness. "A man's soul is marked by how he keeps his neighbor's thirst in mind," he said. Heads nodded. Eli's eyes did not leave the window, but his jaw set. After the amen, folks drifted outside. Children chased each other around the cottonwood. Ada poured coffee from a big kettle and cut the bread into careful slices so every hand found a share. She felt eyes mostly kind, some quick to measure. A buggy rolled up softly, wheels murmuring. Caleb Voss stepped down with a man in a tin badge who smiled like butter left in the sun. Voss removed his hat and spoke in a voice meant for all. "Neighbors, good day. I bring terms for certain holdings. Friendly buyouts. Also a reminder. One Ada Lane owes a contracted debt to a cafe in town. If she comes, papers can be satisfied." Silence tightened. Ada steadied her breath and kept pouring. Eli moved to stand beside her, shoulder to shoulder. He did not raise his voice. "She works for Hart Ranch. She stays on Hart's ground. If there are papers, they will be read in full with witnesses." Mrs. Finch lifted her chin. "Eyewitness," the preacher added. "Churchyard is fair ground. We read together or not at all." Voss's smile thinned. He drew a folded sheet. Ada met the page like a storm meets a fence. She saw the marks, the crooked totals, the fee that grew like weeds. "This is wrong," she said. Her voice was quiet and carried. Eli pointed to the signature line. "Whose hand is that?" "Manager," Voss said. "Authorized. Not the owner," Mrs. Finch said. "And not hers." The deputy shifted, eyes sliding away. "Maybe we reconvene tomorrow," he mumbled. "Tomorrow," Eli said. "Here." He looked at Ada, steady as posts. She found air in a square of ground under both feet. Dust rose behind Voss's buggy as it left the churchyard, and folks exhaled like they had been holding breath for a week. Ada stacked cups. Eli tied the kettle and lifted it to the wagon. He did not speak until they were on the road, hooves knocking a slow beat. "Clock set," he said. "How long?" Ada asked. "Tomorrow noon becomes next week's trouble if we do not answer," he said. "He will bring more paper. Maybe men." Ada looked at the creek, low as a whisper. "Then we bring truth and neighbors." Back at the ranch, wind pressed dust into every crack. Ada shut the windows and wet a cloth. She wrote a list for town: flour, coffee, salt, twine, and set it under the dipper. She checked the lamp oil and counted matches twice. Calm is a tool. Use it well. If trouble came early, it would not find her with nothing to hand. Pike came from the barn. "Saw tracks where the south fence was cut last week," he said. "Fresh rides." Eli's face did not change. "We look before we talk." He saddled and took Sawyer. "Lock behind us," he told Ada. "Lamp low after dark. If a rider calls your name from the yard, do not answer." "I won't," she said. When they left, Ada filled 2 jugs by the door. She laid the juniper spoon on the shelf and sharpened the best knife on the crock. She mixed the dough with calm hands. Bread rises when you do not stare at it. That holds for fear, too. Near sundown, Mrs. Finch rode in. "Voss posted a notice at the store," she said. "Says he'll file for the well at sunrise if Hart can't show deed proofs by noon. Claims the cafe debt ties to you, gives him standing." Ada felt heat climb her neck. "I have no debt to that man." "I know," Mrs. Finch said. "Bring the cafe book. I have a note from the true owner's sister, signed properly." Eli returned near dark. "South line's fine," he said. "Tracks were old, but he's trying for our sleep." He set a small key on the stove nail, spare to the storeroom. "If night brings noise, get inside and bar it." Ada closed her hand around the key. "I'll be ready." Morning came thin and amber. Ada washed the bread bowl and set fresh flour like a small hill. She packed the cafe ledger from her last place, the one with neat lines and the owner's true hand. Mrs. Finch arrived early with a folded letter sealed with blue wax. "From Ruthie May," she said. "Owner's sister. She names the debt settled last winter, signed full." Eli checked the wagon, spare wheel, tool roll, 2 jugs. He handed Pike a short list. "You and Sawyer mind the south pasture till noon. If riders you do not know circle close, swing the gate and let the herd drift to cottonwoods. Do not chase. Keep them calm." Pike swallowed but stood tall. "Yes, sir." Ada tied back her hair and buttoned a plain dress. She tucked the key to the storeroom in her pocket, next to the juniper spoon. It felt like carrying a word. They reached town before the bell. The store porch held neighbors. The preacher, 2 ranch wives, 3 men from Dry Creek who had sold, faces stiff with doubts. The deputy leaned on the post, hat low. Voss stood by the door, papers neat as teeth. "High noon," he said cheerfully. "Let us set things proper." Eli placed the Hart deed on a flour barrel. "Read," he said. The preacher read slowly, named sections and witnesses, and touched the seal that matched the county book. Murmurs eased. Voss lifted his sheet about Ada. Runaway contract. Fee for early leave. Accrued costs. Ada opened the ledger to the page with her last month of work. "Paid in full at New Year," she said. "Signed by Mrs. Ruthie Mae Berrigan, owner." Mrs. Finch laid the blue wax letter beside it. The signatures matched like twins. The deputy scratched his ear. "Looks settled to me." Voss's smile did not reach his eyes. "Clerical confusion," he said. "Then allow me to speak on wells. The territory considers abandoned improvements open to claim." Eli's voice stayed even. "Our well is not abandoned. You drank from it last week." A gust shoved dust across the street, rattling the board. Far out, the horizon was raw. Ada felt grit touch her teeth. "Storm building," the preacher said. Voss folded papers. "By sundown," he said, "you'll wish you took my price." He tipped his hat and stepped down and away. Ada stood her ground. Strong wind only proves good roots. Clouds rose like walls across the plain. The light turned copper. Men in town tightened hat strings and spoke with their eyes. Eli looked once at the horizon and said, "We ride now." Ada gathered the ledger and letter, tucked them deep, and followed him to the wagon. Wind hit outside town, a hard, flat hand. Grit rattled like beans in a jar. They kept low, horses steady, wheels biting the ruts. At the first arroyo, Eli pointed to the wash. "We wait here till the first blast passes," he said. He tied bandanas over noses, wrapped reins, and counted under his breath. When the gust eased, they moved again. At the ranch, the sky had the color of iron. Pike had the herd tucked near cottonwoods as told. Sawyer waved, face gray with dust. "They're holding," he shouted. "But the wire sings." "If it breaks, it won't if we give them room," Eli said. "Open the middle gate. Let them mill slowly. No yelling." Ada ran to the kitchen and latched the windows top and bottom. She set wet cloths along the sills and dampened a sheet to hang over the door. She filled jugs and lined them on the porch rail for the men who would not come in. Calm as a tool. Use it in the wind. The storm hit full force. The day went brown. The fence hummed like a low fiddle. Cows bawled. Ada felt the house lean and then stand back up like a sailor taking a wave. She tied a rope from the porch post to the well and clipped it to her belt. "If you step outside, clip in," she told Pike when he came for water. He nodded, eyes wide but steady. Eli moved through dust like he belonged to it. He set riders at corners, kept hands spread, and cut space where the herd pressed too hard. No whip, no shouting. Only a lifted arm, a swing of the hat, a loop when a yearling panicked. "Breathe," he said to horses and men. They did. A gate latch cracked. Sawyer lunged and missed. Ada was there fast, rope-clipped, body low. She caught the swinging board, set the pin, and leaned till the metal bit home. Wind tore tears from her eyes. She laughed once, fierce and short. "Stay," she told the gate. It stayed. The sky roared. The line held. Work answered the weather. Dust thinned by inches, not miles. The storm did not leave. It crouched and tested. Ada wrung the cloths and set them fresh along the sills. The lamp stayed low, a small moon. From the yard came a different sound under the wind. The sharp twang of wire cut wrong, not sung right. Eli felt it too. He raised his hand and the riders drew close. "South run," he said. 2 men on foot, maybe 3. "They're trying for a break to drive cattle onto Voss land." His voice did not climb. "We fix and we stand. No chase into that dust." Ada fetched the tool roll and a coil of spare wire. She tied the rope to her belt. "I'll carry," she told Pike. "You keep your eyes left and your mouth closed." They moved as a knot along the fence line, shoulders hunched against grit. The cut showed bright where the twist had been rolled back. Sawyer set his boot on the bottom wire and held. Eli laced the splice fast, his hands as sure as a surgeon's. Ada fed staples. Pike kept watch, jaw tight. Shapes loomed in the brown. 2 men with scarves up and hats down. One lifted a board like a club. He took a step and felt a loop settle gently over his wrist. Eli had thrown without hurry. The man froze, knowing quiet hands can still break bones if pushed. "We're mending," Eli said. "You walk back the way you came." A second shadow hissed. Voss pays for a stampede. Voss can pay for good wire instead, Ada said. Her voice came even. This line stays. For a beat, the storm spoke, grit hitting teeth. Then the men backed off, pulled by their own fear more than the rope. Eli loosed the loop and did not pursue. Rule held, do not chase into blindness. They finished the splice. The fence sang true again, a low note that comforted. Ada clipped herself to the porch rope and brought water to each man, touching cups to knuckles so no one fumbled. She found Sawyer's hand bleeding and washed it, then bandaged it with flour sack cloth. By dusk, the brown light lifted to a bruised blue. The herd calmed. In the distance, lightning walked the far mesas. Storm had not won. It had taught. Inside, Ada set bread to rise. Outside, the land waited for the next choice now. When the wind settled to a rasp, the yard showed what it had carried. A barrel lay on its side, a chicken coop door off its hinge, the pump bucket full of red grit. Ada rinsed the bucket and set it upright. Small things first. Big things listen. Eli walked the north fence with Sawyer and Pike, counting posts in a low voice. Line's good, he said. Herd's holding. He looked toward the road where two dust ribbons ran like snakes. Company coming. Voss's buggy rattled in ahead of 3 riders. The deputy rode beside him, badge dulled with dust. Voss stood in the buggy and smiled like the storm had been his hired hand. Bad blow, he said. Hate to see good men wear out on land that will be mined by paper sundown. Eli stepped to the well and laid his palm on the post, as if greeting it. You brought your talk. We brought our deed. Ada stood at the porch with the ledger and Ruthie May's letter. Mrs. Finch rode up silently and took a place by the rail. 2 neighbors came behind her, hats down, eyes up. Voss waved a new sheet. Emergency transfer. Claims Act subsection for abandoned improvements after Act of God events. Your fence is down in 3 spots by witness report. Your herd has drifted. I file, I own. His riders spread like oil. Ada spoke plainly. Fence stands. We spliced it with witnesses. She named them. Eli Hart, Sawyer Lane, Pike Tomlin, and Mrs. Finch. The deputy shifted. Witnesses bind lies. Eli dipped the new bucket and poured water into the trough, slow and steady. Abandoned things don't pour, he said. Voss's smile cooled. He nodded once. The riders edged toward the south gate. Hold, Eli said, voice quiet as shade. He did not lift his gun. He lifted his hand. From the cottonwoods, 3 more neighbors walked out with lariats open. Calm circles. Honest rope. The deputy swallowed. Caleb, don't press it. Voss flicked dust from his cuff. Enjoy your day. I'll enjoy the courthouse. He turned the buggy. He looked at Ada last. Debts always return. She met his eyes without heat. So do truths. They left. Air loosened. Ada set bread to bake for the hands that had stood. Work is made visible. Eli fixed the coop door. We'll eat, he said. Then we plan. Night will come honestly. Supper filled the quiet with good clatter. When plates were stacked, Eli laid a map on the table. Just a pencil sketch of wells, washes, and fence corners. He tapped the creek bend. If Voss tries again, he'll come here. Wind hides hoof noise. Water hides men. He looked at Ada. Can you manage a traveling chuck? I can build a kitchen anywhere, she said. Smoke low. Flame banked. Neighbors gathered close. Mrs. Finch, the scar-jawed roper, 2 Miller boys, and the preacher with a walking stick that had seen hard ground. Mrs. Finch set down fresh papers. Affidavits, she said. Signed by 6 ranchers, witnessed properly. If they cross the line tonight, the law will have more than stories. Eli rolled the rope in quiet loops. No shots unless forced. We catch, we tie, we show. He looked at Pike. You hold horses and your nerve. Nothing heroic. Heroic gets folks hurt. Yes, sir, Pike said, swallowing but ready. Night came with a thin moon. Ada loaded beans, coffee, and a skillet of onions that would carry a smell. She slung the juniper spoon on a thong and hung the kettle from a short iron tripod. At the creek bend, she banked coals and set the pot where the steam drifted along the water like a whisper. She laid bread slices on a warm rock to keep them soft. A kitchen is a flag. It says who you are. Men slid into the cottonwoods and vanished. Eli stood where dark cut him into shadow. He lifted a hand once. The hand fell. The world waited. Hooves in sand, low and careful. 3 riders, scarves up. A 4th on foot with cutters gleaming when the moon lifted. The footman stepped to the fence. Metal clicked. Ada stirred the pot and spoke just loud enough. "Coffee for honest hands." The words slid across water like a coin. The men twitched. One turned his horse. Another nudged forward. A quiet rope fell from a branch, slipped over a shoulder, and settled. Sawyer drew it snug and spoke softly. "Don't fight." The deputy rode in from the road, late, eyes wide. He saw affidavits on the crate, saw wire cutters drop, saw men tied without blood. Relief washed his face like rain that finally showed. "I can sign that," he said. Voss was not there. His absence told on him. Eli nodded once. "We take these to the judge at first light. Paper meets rope. Truth holds." Ada banked the coals and lifted the pot. "Home waits," she said. First light found them on the road to town, the roped men riding sullen between neighbors who did not brag. Ada kept the pot covered with a damp cloth so the beans would not scorch. The deputy rode close, hat low, as if he had been thirsty a long time, and finally remembered where water lived. They reached the courthouse when swallows began their morning scribbles. The judge was a square woman with a clear gaze and boots under her skirt. She listened before she spoke. Eli set the affidavits on her desk. Mrs. Finch laid the blue wax letter beside the cafe ledger. Ada stood still and let the papers do the talking. She was tired of doing. Voss arrived with dust on his cuffs and temper in his eyes. "Hearsay and home cooking," he said. "The law is ink. The law is witness," the judge replied. She questioned each man in turn, wrote in a tight hand, and compared signatures. "These match," she said of Ruthie Mae's letter and the ledger line. "This debt claim is void." Ada felt something inside unclench, quiet as a stiff hinge finally oiled. The judge turned to the cutters. "Who hired you?" One looked at his boots. "A man with a town hat," he said. "Paid in silver. Promised more if the fence fell." "Name him," the judge said. "Caleb Voss," the man whispered. Voss laughed, thin. "Lies from hired hands." The deputy cleared his throat. "I saw them at the creek," he said. "Wire in hand on Hart ground. I signed my name to that." Silence settled, heavier than a shout. The judge reached for a stamp and struck it down. "Warrants for attempted theft of cattle and malicious damage," she said. "Bonds high." She looked at Voss. "You will answer clean or not at all." Voss's smile failed him. He stepped back, calculation eating his courage. "This town is small," he said. "Small towns remember," Mrs. Finch answered. Outside, the sky was rinsed and pale. Ada poured coffee into tin cups for anyone who had stood true. She kept one for Eli and put it in his hand without looking up. He drank and handed the cup back, knuckles brushing hers. "You did steady," he said. "So did you," she answered. They did not speak of thanks. They loaded the empty pot and turned home. The road waited, plain and honest, ahead. They reached the ranch by mid-morning and the land looked tired but willing. Ada opened the windows and let fresh air push the dust out. She scrubbed the table till the grain shone, set the juniper spoon where it always lay, and hung the spare key on the nail by the stove. It clicked softly like a word said right. Pike rode in from the pasture with news that sounded like a psalm. "Herd's calm," he said. "2 calves found, no brands wrong." Eli checked the north gate and sighted along the line. He set a new brace, tamped the post, and stepped back. "True," he said, and his voice eased. Neighbors came by with small gifts that felt large. A sack of flour from the Millers, lamp oil from Mrs. Finch, fence staples from the preacher who said his church roof needed less than Hart's peace. Ada met each gift with food and thanks visible. Slices of bread with butter she had saved, coffee that did not bite, cold water dipped steadily. By afternoon, the sky changed mood. A breeze turned cool and carried a smell like iron-made kind. Clouds walked in on quiet feet. The first fat drop hit the porch and left a dark coin. Then more. Ada stepped out and held her palm up. Rain is a sentence that says stay. Eli stood at the edge of the yard, hat back, face turned to the blessing. He did not smile widely. He looked content, which is rarer. "We'll mend the south lot tomorrow," he said. "Today we let the ground drink." Ada set a pot of meat and onions to slow cook, slipped sage between her fingers, and breathed the clean that rain brings. Pike took the broom to the porch, whistling a piece of the hymn Mrs. Finch had given. The house changed sound, less rattle, more hush. A drip from the eave kept a steady tick like a calm clock. After supper, a few hands brought their chairs to the doorway. Nobody asked for a story, so Ada told one small truth. I walked far thinking I owned nothing but this pot, she said. She touched the handle. Turns out a person can own steady work and a place at a table, if both are given and kept. Eli looked at the key on the nail, then at her. Keys mean doors, he said. Doors mean rooms. Rooms mean a house. House means home, she answered, and neither of them argued with the rain. Morning wore a clean face after the rain. The air smelled like iron turned kind, and the dirt packed down underfoot the way a floor does when a house is loved. Ada opened the pantry and lined jars in a straight row. Flour, beans, coffee, sage. She stitched a short curtain across the window so the afternoon sun would fall softly on the table instead of stabbing it. Eli planned a cedar board on the porch and made a shelf above the stove. He measured once, twice, then set 2 screws true. The juniper spoon took its place as if it had been waiting. He ran a thumb along the edge. Won't catch, he said. Won't splinter. Pike came in with a basket of wet kindling he had split thin to dry fast. Biscuits later? He asked. Later, Ada said. You'll cut the fat gently. Not bully it, he answered, proud he knew. Neighbors rode past slowly, checking fences without making it seem a check. Mrs. Finch dropped a packet of seeds. Mesquite beans for coffee stretch, she said. Sunflower to make a yard look brave. Ada set the dough for a small loaf that would be tomorrow's bread. She drew a chalk mark at shoulder height on the doorframe for Pike. So you can see you're growing, she said. Down by the creek, children skipped stones where water finally spoke. The preacher's wife washed the bell rope and set it to dry. On the church wall, someone had tacked a notice, meeting next week to set a school table. The town was mending itself in ways paper cannot. At dusk, Ada carried 2 mugs to the porch. Steam lifted straight in the calm. Eli sat with his hat on his knee and watched swallows stitch the sky. He looked at the kitchen window, now soft with cloth, then at the key on the nail. I've been thinking about rooms, he said. A house has more than one. Ada felt heat rise, not like the sun but like lamplight. A house needs a keeper, she said. And a keeper needs a house. He nodded once, as if he had been waiting to hear the shape of her thought from her own mouth. The yard held its breath and listened kindly. Some choices arrived quietly, waiting. Morning broke soft, the yard washed clean by rain and work. Ada stood at the stove and set 2 mugs in a straight line. She touched the key on the nail and heard the small click it always made, like the house clearing its throat before it spoke. Eli came in from the porch, hat under his arm. Boots quiet on the boards he had planed smooth. I've got a question that's mostly a vow, he said. Stay, keep this house with me. Take the work, take the quiet, take the storm if it comes. I'll set my back to yours. Ada looked out at the corral where the fence hummed low and true. She saw the shelf he had built, the spoon Pike had carved, the curtain she had stitched. She set her palm on the table he had mended. Yes, she said. I'll keep the stove warm and the door sure. I'll carry your days and mine the same. Eli nodded once like a man sealing a deal he already believed. He lifted a small nail and drove it beside the first. Room for a second key, he said. He set a plain brass key in her hand. Yours? She hung it on the new nail. The sound it made was small and final and good. Neighbors gathered by noon with quiet smiles and honest noise. The preacher spoke one line on the porch, build straight. Keep faith. Mrs. Finch tied a sprig of sage to the door latch. Pike burned a tiny brand in the spoon's handle, a neat H inside a ring. Ada laughed and cried in the same breath and cut bread warm from the oven. Eli poured water from the bucket like a man blessing his own ground. The day settled into work and peace. Toward evening, swallows stitched the sky and the herd grazed like a hymn. Ada stood in the doorway with Eli's coat on her shoulders. He looked once and said, You're home. Folks would tell it later as a small legend, how a woman walked in with only a pot and 2 hands and made a house sing. Years on, their table stayed open and storms passed by a steadier gate each season. If this story found you well, subscribe for more, give it a like, and share it forward.